Monday, May 26th, 2008. Celebration for veterans at Liberty Memorial, the World War I Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Celebrations today are in honor of Frank Buckles, last surviving American World War I veteran. Following the celebration here, Mr. Buckles will go to Pershing's home in Laclede, Missouri. We hope to pick him up there. This is John Wiesman for the Missouri State Museum.
Ready, Ann? I don't want you to have double chin.
Yeah, don't give me the roll. You're going to get my nice frizzy red hair from the ready, too.
Ready?
We were here last weekend.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am? What'd you do with...
I'll get one with you and your wife.
What'd you do? What'd you do with your husband?
He's sitting right there.
Oh, sure.
Come over here. Get our picture. One more. Two great people here. That young lady won't know what.
Sergeant Major Bean, start the parade. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Those troops look absolutely fantastic today. Thank you for coming out on a rather drab and rainy day. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Memorial Day at the National World War I Museum at Liberty Memorial. I am Scott Porter, a retired soldier, and on the Board of Governors here at the Memorial. Today is a very special day, a time to honor and remember the proud men and women who lost their lives while serving our nation. Originally known as Decoration Day, over the years, Memorial Day has evolved as a day of great respect and admiration. Reflect upon the lives and blessings bestowed by so many great Americans. As we honor their memory, it's difficult to describe the valor of those that we honor this day, and in many cases express the terrible pain and loss endured by their families and friends. Their virtue as sacrifice is one of the four guardian spirits on the tower in back of me. Sacrifice is meaningless without remembrance and recognition, and today is the day to reflect back upon those that shed their lifeblood for our great nation. One way to remember them, along with others we would like to eternally recognize, is through a granite brick on the Walk of Honor. But a brick isn't for those only that made the ultimate sacrifice. The other three guardian spirits on the tower are courage, honor, and patriotism. Every person or group of people on a brick exemplifies at least one of these traits, and each brick enables someone to reflect back on the honoree's impact on their lives. Just as important, a brick's granite permanence offers a lasting opportunity for all others to recognize that special person or group. Please take the time today to look at the Walk of Honor, especially the 446 newly dedicated bricks today. You will see many stories stories of sacrifice and selfless service, including those killed in action, prisoners of war, missing in action, veterans from many of our nation's wars, service members from the same families spanning generations and multiple conflicts, civic organizations, community leaders, and even bricks for our allied armies and officers. What a beautiful tribute for them to see that their sacrifice and service has been valued and appreciated. All have a common theme, a love of liberty at this great place that is renowned for liberty. Thank you very much.
Please be seated. Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tina Barber from the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. It is an honor for me to be here today to be able to commemorate Memorial Day. I have the honor of introducing our Master of Ceremonies, which is Miss Donna Pittman from KMBC TV 9 News. She is a native of Independence, Missouri. Donna majored in journalism with a minor in Spanish at the University of Missouri. Her first reporting job was a public radio at KBIA-FM in Columbia, Missouri. Soon after, she began working at KOMU-TV as a one-woman band, shooting, reporting, writing, and editing her stories. Donna spent 2.5 years reporting and anchoring weekend newscasts at WHOI-TV in Peoria, Illinois, before returning to Kansas City to work for KMBC-TV. Donna feels lucky to work in her hometown again. She meets different people and learns something every day. She enjoys reading, photography, and playing the guitar. Today is special to Donna because Donna's father, John Thomas Pittman, known as Jack, lost his life through his service in Vietnam. So Memorial Day has a lot of meaning for her. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Miss Donna Pittman.
Good morning. I know it's raining a little bit, but it's hard to think that it's a bad day. It's being surrounded by all the men and women who've sacrificed so much for our country. So the sun is shining on us today. I do appreciate being invited back again this year. Paul Bosworth was a 20-year-old tail gunner on a B-17 out of the 8th Air Force Station in England. On his 17th mission, which was March 2nd, 1945, his plane was headed for a ball bearing plant just outside of Dresden. They were hit by enemy aircraft fire and forced to bail out over Trier, Germany. He was held prisoner at Nuremberg as the Russians approached. He was forced to march in the bitter cold from Nuremberg to Moosburg, a trip of approximately 8 miles. He was liberated by General George Patton's army on April the 30th, 1945. The display that's in front of you this morning The display in front of us all this morning has been placed by Sergeant Major Philip Hafler. He served in Vietnam in 1968 to 69 with B Company, 503rd Infantry, 173rd Airborne. He sets this display up both here and at the Vietnam Wall to honor our nation's many POWs and MIAs who are not able to be here with us today. We honor their sacrifice in the name of freedom here this morning. And before you is a small table that symbolizes the frailty of one POW alone against his oppressors. You'll see there the white tablecloth that symbolizes the purity of the prisoners of war's intentions. The single rose in the vase reminds us all of family and loved ones who kept faith awaiting his return. A single white candle represents the light of his darkness. The red ribbon on the base reminds us of the red ribbons worn on the lapels of thousands determined to demand a proper accounting of our missing. The wide black ribbon represents the darkness and despair of a POW and those missing in action, while the small yellow ribbon symbolizes a thread of hope that they may be freed of the darkness. A slice of lemon on the plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt on the plate is for the tears that their families shed as they wait. The chair is empty as they are not with us. During this century, approximately 142,000 of our military were POWs or MIAs. These items symbolize the fact that these fallen comrades, brothers, and sisters are again not able to be with us here today. And we remember them and we honor them for their sacrifice. Our chaplain this morning for our service is Spencer Hecox. He's the chaplain for the Korean War Veterans Association, Missouri, Chapter 2. He served in Korea with the 32nd Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry. Spencer is an elder at the Raytown Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and he will now give the invocation.
Gentlemen, uncover. Almighty God, we are brought together here today to remember and honor America's war dead. We pray for your blessing on their souls. We also pray for your blessing on all of us gathered here. Some come with heavy hearts from recent sacrifices. Many have heavy hearts for losses years past. Lord, touch them, comfort them, lighten their burden, and lift their heavy hearts, each and every one, mothers and fathers, wives and husbands, daughters and sons, sisters and brothers. As we proceed with our observance of this Memorial Day, we pray for a special blessing on our honored guests, especially Mr. Buckles, our Gold Star mothers, and all veterans. Knowing that your Spirit is watching over them, may we continue to remember and honor those who made the supreme sacrifice. Amen.
And now Broadway Bill Lord will sing God of Our Fathers.
God of the fathers, whose almighty hand leads forth in beauty of a starry band, from faithful stars in breathage through the sky, thy grateful songs before thy throne arise. Refresh thy people on their toilsome way. Lead us from night to never-ending day. Fill all our lives with love and grace divine, and glory, Lord, and praise be ever thine.
What better place is there than to honor our deceased veterans than here, the National World War I Museum at the Liberty Memorial, a memorial to honor those who served in World War in defense of liberty and defense of our country. It was dedicated to our veterans who died during World War I, and it stands as the only memorial museum of its kind in the world. Since that time, our veterans have served and died, obviously, in many wars, and today we salute all veterans who've served in the past as well as those who are now serving. So I'll ask you to please stand as the All-City Junior ROTC Cadet Colonel Jared M. Poston from Van Horn High School leads us all in the Pledge of Allegiance. And please remain standing after the pledge for our national anthem.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Reset! Arms! Oh, sing and you see by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, with broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, came through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I would like to now introduce Brian Alexander, the Memorial Director.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Liberty Memorial World War I Museum. It's a great honor that the nation's only World War I museum today welcomes America's last World War I veteran, Mr. Frank Woodruff Buckles. More than 4 million American men and women served in uniform in the defense of liberty during the Great War, and the events of 1914 to 1918 shaped the world in countless ways. And by war's end, the United States dramatically had become a world power. The mission of the National World War I Museum is to preserve the history of the Great War and to help people understand how this significant event helped shape our lives and our world today. We are indeed fortunate to have this unique, world-class institution in our community, and Kansas Cityans should be proud for helping create this remarkable resource for the world. Today's ceremony, and the attendance by the last surviving American soldier of that war, Mr. Buckles, is a remarkable event, and we deeply appreciate Mr. Buckles' daughter, Susanna Flanagan, for her assistance in making this visit a reality. Susanna. Mr. Buckles was born in Harrison County, Missouri on February 1st, 1901. He enlisted in 1917 as an underage but enthusiastic recruit, and he served in the Army from 1917 to 1919. He trained at Fort Riley, Kansas, and ultimately attained the rank of corporal. In December 1917, he and 102 men of the 1st Fort Riley Casual Detachment sailed to Europe aboard the HMS Carpathia, the vessel famous for rescuing the survivors of the Titanic in 1912. His unit would later become Camp Hospital No. 35. And during the war, Mr. Buckles drove ambulances in both England and France. After the armistice, he was with the POW escort company returning prisoners to Germany and was discharged in 1919 when he returned to the United States. If I may, I would like to quote from a recent letter of introduction from Mr. Buckles. Mr. Buckles, and I'll read this, Mr. Buckles and his life are a metaphor for the American experience in the 20th century. Duty, honor, achievement. The United States has grown to become a wealthy and prosperous nation. I believe the source of our fortune lies in the willingness of men and women like Mr. Buckles to sacrifice for country and to preserve our way of life. This experiment in democracy is fragile, and it takes people who are willing to serve to protect it, to fight for something larger than themselves. It is with profound humility, Mr. Buckles, that I say thank you. Thank you on behalf of a proud nation, a nation that would not occupy its place in history and the world without men like you. You remind America of the great sacrifices it has taken to get here and inspire this wonderful nation to continue the path that you and your generation have so valiantly and selflessly forged for us, the United States of America. You are an inspiration to us all. I salute you very respectfully. Signed, General Richard Myers, retired, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. To acknowledge this extraordinary weekend, we will permanently install in our museum a photo of Mr. Buckles taken during his visit to the museum. And you can see that photo on exhibit today near the museum store. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as we present Mr. Frank Woodruff Buckles, the last known veteran of World War I, with the American flag that flew over the National World War I Museum on this day, Memorial Day, 2008.
If you look in your programs, you have the words to over there.
Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there.
I believe you may all be seated. Don't know if I have the authority to say that. The Ethnic Enrichment Commission is located on the east side of the memorial grounds. The commission was formed in 1976 to focus on Greater Kansas City's rich cultural heritage. Their members represent 66 Day Committee, whose members are listed on your program, present this Memorial Day observance every year. They also purchase American flags and supply them to cemeteries free of charge for all veterans' graves. This is made possible with the help of the friends listed on the back of your program. At this time, I would like to ask the President of the Permanent Memorial Day Committee, Jack Caligari, and other members of the Permanent Memorial Day Committee to please stand now and be recognized. Again, we'll ask you to please recognize World War I veteran Frank Buckles as well. Now, would all veterans of World War II please stand so that you can be recognized?
Yeah.
Thank you all. Please be seated. And now would all Korean War veterans stand so that you may be recognized? Now we'll ask that all Vietnam veterans, will you stand so that you may be recognized? Thank you. Please be seated. Now I'll ask that all veterans who served in and during Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, the Gulf War, Somalia, Haiti, Bosnia, Kosovo, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq, will you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. We are honored to have several dignitaries with us today joining us as we salute our veterans, and I will ask that you stand, please, when your name is called. And first speaking, I believe, joining us this morning is Missouri Senator Kit Bond.
Thank you very much, Donna. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a typical Memorial Day weekend in Missouri. It's raining. The minor inconvenience of us being wet is so small compared to the magnitude of the service that these men and women here who have served and those we honor have undertaken. We ought to enjoy being rained on and show that we stand with them. And it is a great privilege to be here at the Liberty Memorial, the World War I Museum that is the leader in the nation on this Memorial Day. Today, it is our great honor and duty to recognize the sacrifices of the men and women who have fought for our freedom and fought for freedom of freedom-loving peoples everywhere. And it certainly is a great honor to share this day with Mr. Frank Buckles, as you've already heard, the only World War I veteran we can thank personally. He's the last living reminder of that war fought long ago in the foreign lands in defense of peoples oppressed by the extremists of their time. The debt paid by Mr. Buckles and his fellow soldiers on behalf of future generations must never be forgotten. His life epitomizes a service, sacrifice, patriotism, and dedication to our nation. These men, the men and women who followed after them, have made possible all our freedoms, from speech and religion to those we take for granted, freedom from dictatorship, excessive intrusion, freedom to live in peace, prosperity, and a hope for a better day. On this day, I join with all of you in saying a heartfelt thanks to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have lost their lives for their country, for their families left behind. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. For the many, many more who are injured, we wish you well and will fight to continue to provide for your care. Our obligation is to honor the sacrifices by remembering, by taking care of those fortunate enough to return, and by living in such a way that we honor what they have done for us. They did not take our freedom for granted, and we must not take their sacrifices for granted. Now, with all the wonderful awards that Mr. Buckles has received, I am presenting him with a copy of the comments in the Congressional Record. They pale beside the other recognitions, but this will start a third or fourth wall. So, Mr. Buckles, our sincere thanks and congratulations.
Thank you, Senator Bond. Next speaking and joining us this morning is Missouri Congressman Emanuel Cleaver.
Good morning. On this Memorial Day, we once again gather at the Liberty Memorial to respectfully remember our fallen veterans. We're, of course, honored to have Mr. Frank Woodruff Buckles, World War I veteran from Missouri, present for today's ceremony. 91 years ago, our doughboys left home to engage in the war to end all wars. Private Buckles, at the age of 16, joined more than 4 million Americans who traveled over there to fight in the Great War. 116,000 Americans did not return. One of the great experiences of my 8 years as mayor was in the second term when Ollie Gates, Carl DiCapo, and I met in the office and responded to their proposal to try to rebuild this Liberty Memorial. We were successful in getting it on the ballot, and you voted for it, which paved the way for this museum. This is the only World War I monument on this planet which is exclusively dedicated to the sacrifice of the people of this nation. The money for the original construction of the Liberty Memorial was raised with respect and heavy hearts by citizens of this great metropolitan area in 11 days. Memorial Day is our national day of mourning, established to honor those who valiantly served our great nation. And as we gather today in honor of generations of Americans who lost their lives in battle, we turn to our veterans again, and we extend our gratitude, bowing our heads in memory of lost comrades. The state of Missouri has paid dearly, even in this latest war. To date, 78 Missourians have died. 719 Missourians have been wounded. And from this 5th Congressional District, these are the names of those who have died. Sean P. Rankin, Independence. Benjamin J. Ashley, Independence. Matthew M. Murchison, Independence. Specialist Randy W. Pickering, Belton. Sergeant Donald Ralph Walters, Kansas City. Spec Joe L. Bartoli, Independence. Richard M. Crane, who is special to me. I found out after visiting with his family that when I had my knee replaced at St. Joseph Hospital, about a year before the war started, he was in the operating room. He worked there at the hospital. Sergeant First Class Michael T. Fuga, Independence. Benjamin J. Ashley, Independence. Todd E. Davis, Raymore, Missouri. we are proud of what they've done, and we offer our support to their families. This is where we ought to be on this rainy Memorial Day, paying respect to the men and women who sacrificed so much for us. I would like to now present to our honoree a congressional record which was entered into Congress on May 22nd. Now, the House of Representatives does not have the same kind of money that the U.S. Senate has. We don't have the opportunity to have large, bulky plaques enclosed in glass, but we do the best we can. And so I would like to present this to you, sir.
Very true, probably.
Congressman Cleaver, thank you. Other dignitaries that are with us today, State Senator Chris Koster. Can't see behind me, so please stand when your name is called. Brigadier General Deborah Rose, commanding Kansas National Guard. And the Chief of Staff for Congressman Graves, Tom Brown. Missouri State Representative, District 40, John P. Burnett. Missouri Representative, District 42, Leonard Hughes. Missouri Representative, District 50, Michael Brown. Chester Thompson with the Black Veterans Association. And speaking now is 1st District at-large Councilwoman Deb Herman.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here and represent the city of Kansas City this morning. Again, to repeat the comments, I am very glad to stand here in the rain and would stand anywhere to honor our veterans and everyone here this morning. Again, thank you and welcome Mr. Buckles from Kansas City, Missouri.
Also here with us this morning, 3rd District at-large Councilwoman Melba Curls. 3rd District Councilwoman Sharon Sanders Brooks. 4th District at-large Councilwoman Beth Gottstein. 4th District Councilwoman Jan Markison. 5th District at-large Councilwoman Cindy Serco. Also with us, the Parks and Recreation President, John Fierro. Parks and Rec Commissioner, Tyrone Aiken. Kansas City Parks Commissioner, Miss Aggie Stackhouse. The Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation, Mark McHenry. Parks and Rec Commissioner, Ajamu Webster. Director of the Junior ROTC Kansas City Schools, Lieutenant Michael Bird is with us. So is retired General Vincent Ward, 4-star General. Gold Star Mother, Mrs. Debbie Shanahan. And Gold Star Mother escorts Brigadier General David Quantock and Major Terry Williamson. Also with us, Mr. Sayer. I'm so sorry if I don't speak French and I practice this. Mr. Sayer Barcelini, personal advisor to the French Ministère de la Défense and the Secrétaire d'État aux Anciens Combattants in charge of memory matters and the celebration of the 90th anniversary of the centennial of the victory of 1918. Thank you for being here. Also, the chairman of the board of directors of the National World War I Museum, Tom Crystal. Our honorary chairman this morning is Commander John Absetz, U.S. Navy. Following his boot camp training, he was selected for the Naval Aviation Cadet Program and was commissioned and received his aviation designation in April of 1991. His first sea duty was with Helicopter Combat Support Squadron 11, being deployed twice, first on the USS Mount Hood as part of the Lincoln Battle Group supporting UNISOM II in Somalia, and second aboard the USS Essex to help provide security forces ashore for withdrawal of all UN forces from Somalia. Following this duty, he was assigned Whiting Field in Florida as a primary and intermediate flight instructor. While there, he enrolled in Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and received a BS degree in professional aeronautics and graduated with honors. Commander Absetz then was assigned a ship's company. Let's say thank you to Mr. Buckles, who's leaving us right now.
States to give recognition to those individuals who have served our great country. Museums like the one we have gathered at today tell the stories of battles and men and women who fought bravely to defend our country. As you walk through this museum behind us and try to fathom the significance and sheer scale of World War I want you to remember the heroism of the sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines who fought in these battles cannot be fully articulated. While I have the chance, I would like to thank the staff and volunteers of Liberty Memorial for the beautiful museum they have built and the work they have put in that has made it possible for this museum to exist. This Memorial Day, we were fortunate to be joined by one of the heroic warriors that went off to Europe as a soldier and fight German aggression. Frank Buckles joins us as we remember the thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who perished during the war to end all wars. As I went through the museum a couple weeks ago, I couldn't help but look back and wondered what would have happened if the U.S. had not entered World War I. Leading up to the war, Woodrow Wilson tried to have the United States remain neutral. It wasn't until there were multiple aggressive acts against our interests abroad and a telegram from Germany to Mexico trying to encourage Mexico to join Germany and ally against the United States. When Woodrow Wilson received this deciphered telegram from England, he encouraged Congress to declare war. On April 6, 1917, Congress declared war and America joined England and France to fight against Germany.
Many men found themselves eager to join the armed forces to fight against the Germans. Many young men, like Frank Buckles, had to misrepresent their age in order to serve. These young men were determined to fight for their homeland and had little regard for the dangers that lay ahead of them. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of today share many similarities with men like Frank Buckles. They volunteered to enter the military. They're dedicated to their country and their brothers in arms. They're willing to go into harm's way to defeat aggression. They accept unforgiving conditions and hardships while working to defeat the enemy. And most believe that words like honor, duty, patriotism have real meaning. I'm proud to be part of today's armed forces. I'm also proud that today's armed forces share many of the values of the previous generation of servicemen and women. Another group which shares many of these values is often the forgotten family. Families of service members. Today I want to recognize the contributions of family members, husbands, wives, sons and daughters, and parents. They're the ones who provide the strength that we need to deploy for long periods. For many of us, the backbone of this support is the military spouse. They accept being a single parent when their spouse is deployed. They accept the fact that their spouse is going into harm's way. When a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine is killed, it is up to the family members to pick up the pieces of their lives. I encourage everyone to offer their prayers and support to the family members left behind. While the families carry the burden of grief, it is the duty of the rest of us to ensure that deaths are not in vain. And let it be a priority to remember those who have fallen while defending the United States on this day and any other. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce our Marshal of the Day. Don, if you could please stand. Can't see. Okay, right in front of me. Thank you. Our Marshal of the Day is Don Redding, who served as a flight engineer gunner on a B-24 flying out of the 15th Air Force in Italy. On his 17th mission, he was shot down over Vienna, Austria, and was a prisoner of war for 5 months. Thank you, sir. And now I would like to introduce James Beckner of the Sons of Union Veterans to remind us that freedom is not free.
Freedom is not free. I watched the flag pass by one day. It fluttered in the breeze. A young soldier saluted it, and then he stood at ease. I looked at him in uniform, so young, so proud, so tall. With hair cut square and eyes alert, he'd stand out in any crowd. I thought, how many men like him have fallen through the years? How many had died on foreign soil? How many mothers' tears? How many pilots' planes shot down? How many died at sea? How many foxholes were soldiers' graves? No, freedom is not free. I heard the sound of taps one night when everything was still. I listened to the bugler play and felt a sudden chill. I wondered how many times the taps had meant amen when a flag pricked a coffin of a brother or a friend. I thought of all the children, of the mothers and the wives, of the fathers, sons, and husbands with interrupted lives. I thought about the graveyard at the bottom of the sea, of unmarked graves in Arlington. No, freedom is not free.
On May 5th, 1868, General John A. Logan, Commander-in-Chief of the Grand Army of the Republic, proclaimed in General Order No. 11 that a day be set aside every year for decorating graves of comrades who died defending their country. May the 30th of that year marked the very first formal observance of Decoration Day with music, prayers, and speeches. In 1882, Decoration Day was changed to Memorial Day. However, it was not until 1967 that it actually officially became a holiday. Today, flags are authorized to fly at half-mast until noon. You can read your program for more on how it all started. The American Legion Band, conducted by Heather Pickett, will now play the Armed Services Medley. Please stand when your branch of services medley is played. Female in the Kansas National Guard. Her position with the National Guard is the director of the Joint Forces headquarters in Kansas. She's responsible for organizing, training, and deploying Kansas National Air and Army Guardsmen to provide assistance to local communities during domestic response when the resources at the local area have been exhausted. Brigadier Rose has a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing from Washburn University and a master's degree in nursing from Wichita State University. She's active in the community as a volunteer registered nurse, the organist for the Overbrook United Methodist Church, the president of the board of directors at the Topeka YWCA, and is involved in numerous other activities both in the military and in her community. She and her husband, Joe Rose, live on the family farm in Overbrook. She has one daughter, one son, 4 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. Brigadier General Rose.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Donna. Maybe the rain is really God's tears for all the people all the soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines that we've lost over the years. As I was preparing for my comments today, I thought back about my memories of Memorial Day as a child. And what I remember are the peonies were blooming, and we would go with our parents to the various cemeteries to put flowers on the graves of our deceased relatives, none of which had ever served in the military. And I guess that's why it really didn't surprise me in a number of speeches I read when they asked children what Memorial Day means to them. The typical response was, "Why, that's the day the pool opens." As a veteran, it is my duty to convey the message that Memorial Day is not just another 3-day weekend. And as you've heard, what we know as Memorial Day actually began as Decoration Day to honor Union soldiers that died during the Civil War. It was established at a time to decorate the graves of the war dead with flowers, and they believed that May 30th was the day chosen because flowers would be in blossom all over the country. After World War I, Congress changed the name to Memorial Day and expanded the recognition to all who died in any war or military action. In 1971, Congress changed with the National Holiday Act. Memorial Day became the last Monday in May, and for many, just a 3-day weekend to begin the summer vacation season. In response to the ambivalence that ensued regarding the real meaning of Memorial Day, Congress established the White House Commission on Remembrance to, quote, encourage the people of the United States to give something back to their country, which provides them so much freedom and opportunity, end quote, by encouraging and coordinating commemorations in the United States. Camilla Laspada, the executive director of the Commission on Remembrance, states, quote, it's a way that we can all help put the memorial back in Memorial Day, end quote. One of their programs is the National Moment of Remembrance, where they ask all of us to pause at 3 o'clock today, wherever you are, just to give a moment's thought to those who paid for our freedom with their very lives. It's been said that for a nation to be successful, it must be willing to serve. Our military personnel are and will remain the centerpiece of our national security. They symbolize the nobility of selfless service and sacrifice, and even the loss of their very lives. Our most potent weapon in this war, without a doubt, are the brave men and women in uniform. They come from all across America, from small towns and large cities, and from a variety of backgrounds. They all volunteered, and they answered their nation's call to duty. Many of them will go to war, and some of them will not return. We must not forget their sacrifice. Since the Revolutionary War, more than 42 million men and women have served our nation's military. More than 650,000 of these selfless warriors have died in war or military action. These numbers seem overwhelming, and many a spouse or parent has asked, why did we go to war? Why must we fight? We go to war when our beliefs or shores are threatened. We go to war because we believe in protecting the fundamental rights of people. No war is good, but sometimes it is necessary. Our military members fight and die not for the glory of war, but for the prize of freedom. In the words of the philosopher John Stuart Mill, quote, "War is an ugly thing, but not the ugliest of things. The decayed and degraded state of moral and patriotic feeling which thinks nothing is worth war is much worse. A man who has nothing for which he is willing to fight, nothing he cares more about than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature who has no chance of being free." End quote. At the heart of America's is freedom for us and all nations willing to fight for it. Yes, the price is high, but our freedom is precious beyond measure. As we remember our fallen heroes today, our hearts go out to those who will never forget, the families they left behind. People whose wounds are still fresh 20, 40, even 50 years later. For those who have not lived it, it's hard to imagine what it must be like seeing with shock and puzzlement and dread a uniformed officer and a chaplain approach the front door and hearing them express the great sorrow and gratitude of the United States, saying, "We regret to inform you." When you think of the loss, do not think in terms of thousands of casualties, but think of it in terms of one, because each casualty was someone's loved one. At the end of the war, while the image of a jubilant country dancing and flag waving in Times Square is vastly different from that of a grieving parent, spouse, or child who must face the rest of their lives without their loved ones. Those who have not served in the military may never understand why we choose to serve and why we would be willing to sacrifice our very life in service to our country. And you know, it really is difficult to explain, but we are just driven to serve our country. In Lynchburg, Virginia, there's a monument stairway that honors veterans of all wars. An inscription there by an unknown author reads, "I stood up, I showed up. I stepped forward, I raised my right hand. I stood in the gap, I walked in the fire. I did not dodge, I did not evade. Consequently, I have nothing to prove, no one to convince. Those who matter already know, those who don't never will. I believe that the Almighty reserves a corner of heaven, probably around an eternal campfire, where someday we can all meet and embrace, all the band of brothers and sisters throughout the ages, to tell our stories, while envious bystanders watch and wonder how awful the violence must have been to bring such an unlikely group so close to the hand of God. Until we meet there, thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. God bless each of you, and God bless this great nation.
On May 28, 1918, President Woodrow Wilson approved a suggestion from the Women's Committee of the Council of National Defense that American women should wear black armbands on their arms, gilded with stars on the band, for each family member who died in war. Since that time, a service flag displayed from the home or business has indicated the number of members of a family serving in the armed forces or who have died during such service. Blue stars indicate living members currently in the service, while gold stars indicate members who have died. Thus, the term Gold Star Mother applies to women whose sons or daughters have died in military service. Today, our honorary Gold Star Mother is Mrs. Debbie Shanahan of Kansas City, Missouri. Her son, Specialist Matthew Murchison, was deployed to Iraq as a military policeman in the 127th Military Police Company, 720th Military Police Battalion, 89th Military Police Brigade. On August 4th, 2007, Matthew was killed. He was killed in action when his convoy of 30 vehicles was struck by an improvised explosive device in Baghdad. Specialist Murchison was 21 years old. Born in Hutchinson on October 11, 1985, Matthew Murchison was a Kansas City area native who was known for his loyalty to his friends, his devotion to his family, and especially for his mischievous sense of humor. Evidence of his lasting ties to family and friends can be found on a special memorial website that Matt's sister, who's amongst us today, Melissa, created. Friends and family continue to leave online messages and tributes to this area hero. The website has also provided a way to ensure his legacy through helping others. Visitors may make donations to the Fisher House, a private-public partnership that provides housing near major military and VA medical centers for families of wounded soldiers while the servicemen and women get their medical care that they need. Through his efforts, Matthew continues to touch the lives of others. After graduating from Olathe East High School in 2004, Matt enlisted in the Army and went through basic training at Fort Leonard Wood. We are honored to have Brigadier General David E. Quantock from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, here with us today to honor Matthew. Would Mrs. Shanahan and her escorts, Brigadier General Quantock and Airman Green, please assemble in front of the stage for the placement of the wreath. Honor Guard, please place the wreath. Our wreath will be carried today by First Sergeant Randy Sandy of the U.S. Army and Master Sergeant David Hunt of the U.S. Marines. A second wreath will be presented by Susan Holcomb of the American Legion Auxiliary Unit 21. Gentlemen, please place the wreath. As Brigadier General Quantock and Airman Green escort Mrs. Shanahan to the Walk of Honor, where a stone has been placed in honor of her son, Specialist Matthew Murchison, we would like to recognize additional Gold Star mothers in attendance today. Mrs. Cynthia Vosser, mother of Lance Corporal Christopher Vosser, U.S. Marines, killed in action 8 April 2004 in Iraq. Mrs. Joe Thurley Cox, mother of Petty Officer 3rd Class Samuel Patrick Cox, U.S. Navy, died in a helicopter crash 16 July 2003. Mrs. Elaine Anderson, mother of Sergeant Ian C. Anderson, U.S. Army, killed in action 15 January 2007. And Mrs. Riola Ivory, mother of Sergeant Major Lacey B. Ivory of the U.S. Army, who died when the plane struck the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Before we close our program today, I'd like to tell you about our two buglers. Mel Prezant, Jewish War veteran, Mayor's Enrichment Committee, and the Kansas State and Kansas City Area Director for Bugles across the nation, providing a bugle at any veteran's funeral. Also, Gary Kanat, a Vietnam veteran, and his wife and their son, an Iraq veteran, went back to Vietnam where they played taps on battlefields all across the land. Chaplain Hecox will now give the benediction.
Gentlemen, uncover. Eternal God, with a feeling of thanksgiving, we prepare to travel our separate paths. We are thankful for the freedom to assemble and honor those men and women who paid the price for our freedom and liberty. O Lord, we pray for your blessings and care and guidance on the brave young men and women who continue to serve and sacrifice for our nation today. We pray that you will watch over each of us as we continue with your help to serve humankind in the way you have directed us. Amen.
Paul Bosworth, please retrieve the MIA POW cover now. Please be prepared for a loud report as the Civil War Collins B Battery fires a salute to honor all deceased veterans. The 3-round volleys will be followed by silver taps played by Mel Prezant and Gary Kanat.
Your 109 going off.
That's the best part. Everybody jumps.
When I was in Vietnam, we had a battery of 109. When they fired outside the building, they didn't fire, I didn't see good at all.
That's just we're fans. I'd love to see the kids jump.
No, they're not loud as it could have been, though. Oh, no.
Get that ready.
You know it's coming and it still sounds loud.
Oh, that's... They're not...
You got to jump out of here. Thank you.
sun comes out.
Yeah, well.
Thank you all for coming here today and paying your respects to all of our veterans who have served and sacrificed so much so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have today. This concludes our program. Feel free to come view the Walk of Honor before you leave. Happy Memorial Day. 1, 2, 3. I was just told that someone left this in their seat. I don't know how you describe it. Is it a blue backpackish thing that you would wear on your side?
And again, I just want to welcome you. I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, but it's very important, of course, that we gather here today to honor the veterans that have served and are currently serving. And with that, I would like to introduce Coach Steve Long to do the invocation. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us, a beautiful day. We pray that you will bless this service, Lord, and those in the program. It's an honor to be here today, Lord, and recognize those who have led our country in times of war to times of peace. Father, we know that you're the Prince of Peace, and we seek you, Lord, always that we might have peace. We also know that we live in a dangerous world where sin runs rampant and nations rise up against nations, and Lord, we find ourselves in a time like that even now. And we thank you, Father, for those who are courageous, those who are sacrificial in their giving of their very lives to serve in war that we might have peace. It's an honor to stand before these walls of honor, Lord, and realize the many lives from within our own community and even some of our own families that have served in wars before us, Lord, and we owe them a great debt that we can live in a land of peace, a land of prosperity, because of their fight, their wars, even their death for our freedom. We thank you, Father, for General Pershing, who is a great leader as well as a great patriot. And we thank you, Father, for this place that we can memorialize his service to our nation and represent our county and this community. Thank you, Father, for all that you do in our life. And now, Lord, we pray that you'll bless this service in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Major George Avery. Major George Avery served with me in the 311th Division Battalion in Lexington. And again, it's just a great pleasure to introduce Major George Avery.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first say what an honor it is to speak to you today, Memorial Day 2008. When I was given this honor, I was told I'd be speaking to a gathering of many individuals, but these would be predominantly veterans. I thought, great, these people are some of my own kindred spirits, and then I noticed that we have a couple other dignitaries here as well. As I was walking through the crowd, I saw a retired Major General. Major General, I believe it's Warren, is in our ranks today. I wanted to thank him for being here. And then there's a French delegation as well. And I wanted to thank them for making the long trip across the pond to make it here to the fleet today. isn't here yet. I've heard he's in Kansas City. And as I was getting ready for this speech, I researched a little bit about Frank's life. And it wasn't hard to do. Frank has had a rich life, and it's been well documented. So if y'all stay around today, I think he'll be here, and he's got a lot that you can hear about. Frank's 107 years old, and during his life, I think he's the only surviving American World War I veteran, and that's something to be said. In World War I, he served as an ambulance driver, and in World War II, he was a prisoner of war with the Japanese for 3 long years. He's seen our world change from a horse and buggy mode of transportation. I probably wouldn't have gotten a ticket today if I was driving a horse and buggy. But he saw the world come from that to a world of mass communication and mass transportation. Frank's seen a whole lot, and he's seen the world go to even space exploration. Frank's a good man. He's lived his life, as far as I can tell, with honor. And when he gets here, I think we all ought to shake his hand and thank him for his life. It's all the good work he's done. Memorial Day is a day of remembrance. It's a remembrance of those that have given their very lives so we may enjoy the freedom we've had today. Now, a guy by the name of Joseph Stalin said the death of one is a tragedy, but the death of a million is a statistic. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'll tell you, these walls speak of a little of it. From my studying, there's a lot more. We've got 1,173,666 American men and women who have died paying their price for the freedom we have today. Over a million people, a million American souls, from the 4,435 that died in the American Revolution, assisted by the French, to the 4,069 fellow veterans that have died in Operation Iraqi Freedom. That's a lot of Americans that have paid the ultimate price. And I guess, to me, you begin to wonder why. And I've served in war. And when the bullets start flying, it's more to protect the person that's on your left and your right and to keep things together. But that's after the bullets start flying. There's something that's got to get you to wear the uniform. And I can't speak to the many other soldiers I've served with. I can't speak to the general or the rest of the veterans here. But I'll tell you what got me to suit up, and that is freedom. The freedom that we have in America to sit back and enjoy the land that we have, the ability to speak what we want to say, America. And as I go around and I talk with people, a lot of us, I think, don't understand our freedom. And I'm sorry, I might bore you a little bit, but I'm going to talk about some of our freedoms, because that's something else we got to remember on Memorial Day, is why people have paid the price. What made us do this? And it's our country. It's America. I believe that understanding our freedom and how good we have, it's the first step in appreciating the sacrifice made by so many of our countrymen or women. Our freedoms are enumerated in the Constitution, of which many of us have sworn our very lives to protect and defend. And General Pershing did a lot of his life protecting our freedom and also the freedom of other people throughout the globe. Our first freedom: Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for a freedom or for a redress of grievances. Now, I'm a free-speaking man, and I like to put things simply, so here goes my interpretation of the First Amendment. It means we can pray to whoever we want to. It says that we can say what we want to unless it's going to cause harm to another individual. It says we can gather where we want to, just like we're doing today. And it says we can sue the government if it causes us harm. The Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms and not be infringed. This has been cussed and discussed quite a bit. Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner prescribed by law. During the Revolution, the British used to come and house their soldiers in our homes. We didn't like that. So this amendment means that your home is your home, and the military will not take up residence there like the British did in the years preceding 1776. Fourth Amendment. The right of the people shall be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. They shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the things to be seized. My take. Again, your home is your home, and you shall not be subject to unreasonable searches and seizures. The government has to attain a certain level of proof before they start going through your personal property. Fifth Amendment. No person shall be held answered for capital or otherwise infamous crime unless presentment of an indictment of the grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, wherein actual service in time of war or public danger, no shall issue any person be subject to the same offense to be put twice in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Ooh, put in a lot of words there. My take. The government cannot hold you for a crime unless you're indicted by a grand jury. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. If the government exercises eminent domain and takes your property, it must be determined for the higher good of the public, and they must fairly compensate you. Amendment 6. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right of a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have previously ascertained by law, and be informed of the nature and cause of the accusations, be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have assistance of the counsel and defense. My take. You can have a speedy trial. You can confront your witnesses. Amendment number 7. In suits of common law, where the value of controversy shall exceed $20, the right of a trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. My take. Trial by jury. 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Saves us from cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bail. 9. The enumeration of the Constitution. Certain rights shall not be construed or denied to disparage others retained by the people. That says that in the Bill of Rights, that doesn't contain all our freedoms there. That sole document does not list what we have as freedoms here in the United States. 10. Powers not delegated by the Constitution nor prohibited by the United States are reserved by the states respectively or the people. What that does is it lessens the power of the federal government and empowers the states. We have about 17 other amendments to the Constitution which give us guidance about other things. It abolished slavery, one of them did. It granted the right to vote to all American citizens. Limits the presidential term in office to 2 terms. It lets us do great things like pay taxes. And it gives us equal protection of the law. It defines citizenship. Now I know some people will say that the U.S. government hasn't held up its end of the bargain a lot of times. I'm not a constitutional scholar or lawyer. I'm a simple soldier. And I believe in 2 quotes from a fellow by Winston Churchill. He said the first quote is that democracy is the worst form of government, except everything else has been tried. He also said courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities, because it's the quality which guarantees all others. think that sums it up for Memorial Day. Is all those other freedoms I listed, they wouldn't be worth a hill of beans unless there were soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that were willing to back them up with their very lives. Memorial Day is about remembering the men and women who have helped us maintain our rights, our freedoms. These men and women were drafted or volunteered to carry out their actions and be at the very tip of the spears to hold the freedoms which I specified above to be true. When I was going through the business of writing this speech, I thought about the sights and sounds of being in the military. I thought, that'd be a good speech. Write about the military so us veterans can reminisce about things. And I asked a lot of people I served with, some of the officers and sergeants, about some of the things they'll remember. Many of them listed tasks, which we here in America play for our fallen soldiers. I must agree, TAPS does bring about memories to you. For those of us that have been part of combat operations and lost soldiers, it evokes unpleasant memories and gives us chills. It also awakes the slumbering warrior spirits that makes us want to stand and protect. We as soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, and veterans know this because we've stood the line. We have protected America in her hour of need, and we've seen less fortunate places in this world. I know this because I've walked the ground in Korea for about a year, and spent a year in Iraq as well. I've seen people without rights. I've seen the mass manipulation of people for profit. I've seen the tears, the death, and the horror of war, and know that here in America we have the freedom of war being imposed upon our own soil. I know many of the veterans in this crowd have seen these as well. We have freedom from oppression and the ability to choose our own path here in America. This path is not guaranteed to be easy or without pitfalls, but if navigated successfully, our path can be fruitful and profitable. Memorial Day, again, is about that. Memorial Day is a day to remember the sacrifices of others and be thankful. Be thankful for those who had the courage to stand up and defend us from the forces that threaten our freedom and our very way of life. Memorial Day is a day to remember that those that never came back. I thank you, Sergeant First Class Franco Grease, Sergeant Dixon, and Inspector Flores, and all others that have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom today. I thank you for the opportunity to speak for you, and I wish you good Memorial Day. Thank you very much.
the laying of the wreath. American Legion Post 197, Pershing Old Home Post. With assistance from me. And now we will have the rifle salute from Brookfield VFW Post 4557, followed by tap. For our closing remarks, I'd like to thank you again for coming to General John J. Pershing, Boyhood State Historic Site. And thank you so much for coming out today. I know we've really tempted a risk of rain. Hopefully you can stick around with us. There'll be refreshments to the west on the where the tent is located at. After that, later on, we'll be meeting back with Mr. Buckles when he arrives. Let me go ahead and hand this off to Steve Long for benediction.
Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, as Major McCree mentioned, we have heard some of the sounds of war, the rifle fire, the attacks. But even the sounds of war provide the opportunity for peace. And Lord, remind us to pray often for peace. We know, Lord, that as you said in your word, that there will always be wars and rumors of wars until you come again and bring a new heaven and new earth. Because of sin and humanity's sin against humanity, we must fight war. I pray, Father, that those who fight for us this day, that you would keep them safe, Lord. And for those, Lord, who will perish, and every day some do, we pray, Father, that they'd be prepared to meet you. Thank you, Father, for those who lead us and those among us who have led in the past and represent that leadership that we so need today. We thank you, Father, for their sacrifice, their service, their leadership. We pray your deepest blessings upon them, Lord. Thank you for the testimony we've heard, and may that testimony and the passion behind it inspire us, Lord, to serve in our areas of service with passion and desire, enjoying the freedom that we do. pray for Fred Buckles, that he would have a safe journey here, and that we would be able to enjoy meeting him and getting acquainted with him. We pray for those who have provided this service today, and pray your blessings upon them. In Jesus' name. Again, thank you for coming for our first part of our program. Please enjoy the refreshments we have, and if you can, stick around. Thank you very much.
Gary Taylor? Yeah. You weren't ready for the gunfire, were you? You blend.
Yeah. Haven't seen you for a long time.
Still there.
I still wanted to say, I retired. I took it as soon as I got, well, not as soon, I got 2 years back. I took it as long as, I took it.
Really?
And then what is it, another 25, 30 minutes here in Jeff City. Well, I don't know whether I'm going to stick around. Maybe it's the Buckles or not.
We saw him in Kansas City. We were there for the ceremony this morning. You know, didn't get covered. Rain.
Did it? I had rain up in this area all day. We had memorial services over in Brookfield. We got the main cemetery, and then we've got the.
Absolutely, I'd love to. My wife is around here somewhere. If I could grab her. I tell you, if you could get it now, we'll get you the email address.
Okay, he's going to clear his.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to clear a few.
Somewhere near the diaper bag or in it.
Still Sam the car's full.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one also, so
Okay.
I don't miss them.
Oh, or you can book it.
Okay.
Yeah, Mommy got a brochure.
Would you just like the three of you then? Yeah, okay. Well, okay. It'll autofocus. That's what you press the tickets. Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, very good.
Okay.
It may take a second to recycle.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. Okay.
Bon.
Let me do.
Thank you, young.
Thank
you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you just give me a card, I can email it.
I can. Do you happen to have a business card on you, Christy? In your wallet? Okay.
Yeah. We'll get it.
I can go to my vehicle.
Oh, I can check my billfold, see if I've got something.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to get it?
Showing what it's in the back area.
Oh, okay.
Alors, est-ce que tu as le temps? C'est le cas. Qu'est-ce que non, il appelle les anglaises. Appelle.
Or do you want, it would be easier if you looking at the hat. Which do you want? Okay, come on, Ben. Can we put your blanket like this so it doesn't drag the ground?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. On dirait l'église quand même.
Oh, you need to go.
About what time did the guest speakers guys get to do it?
Move this off of the sidewalk.
Okay. Seems like a really great man. Seems like a whole community gets behind him. You don't see that much. Yeah, it's just sort of fun time to survive. We'll a lot of one-on-one.
Dog.
Oh, thank you.
You got it.
I guess this is all rigged up.
Walk up there and give it to her and make sure she knows how to email me. Do you have any questions about anything?
No, I was just thinking how glad I was with you.
I think it's most of them made that because they know where to get the right.
Flip through some French phrases here. Calling her Je suis American. I want a horse.
Jack, how you doing?
Good, and you?
Pretty good. Yes, you know.
Cycle, motor car, axe. I want to sleep. I want to rest.
I got a ring here in the car. I thought it was.
I paid. I want 90 years of back pay. I lost my way.
Where are you from?
Fort Leonard Wood. Yes, Jack. Did you see a doggy running around? Yeah, he probably wants some of your chicken nuggets.
Your collection?
Yes, sir. So it's, both John and I have some of this equipment, and a couple of times a year we like to bring it out and show it off. And, it's all from the respect that we have for the men that actually do this. That we like to come out and kind of show the equipment that they used. And
I've got pretty good.
Oh, do you? Oh, okay, okay. It's getting harder to come by.
Oh yeah. I collect more.
Just have a personal interest or connection with it, or
Well, I didn't start out. I was dealing in antiques, 60s, went to a lot of
Alors, ça correspond à quoi?
C'est des gens de...
Bon, en tout cas, il faut venir prendre en photo parce qu'il a trouvé quelque chose qui ne va pas.
C'est vrai? Aussi?
Oui, il y a un truc super. Alors,
c'est vachement bien.
Il a tout fait. Là, il y a la mission. Entre nous, il y a des missions. Voilà, il y a des émotions. Ça, c'est cool.
You want some more chicken nuggets, Jack? I just saw your shoe.
You ate 2.5 of them.
Guess we'll see you August 23rd.
Oh, yeah.
I live in Marshall.
Very much.
You know, we
Mark III was just a little bit different. Fired different ammunition and was just shaped just a little bit differently. But if you know about the Lee Enfield, the Battle of the Somme, you've really read a lot about World War I history, haven't you? Well, you better be careful. Oh, okay. See, that's how I got started doing all this. I was reading books on World War I, the Civil War, and got really interested in doing it. And maybe you will too someday. From just south of here, a place called Fort Leonard Wood. It's an army post, and they do a lot of trading there.
Thank you.
There you go. I'm sorry, sir? Oh, was it? You go through basic there? Okay. Okay. Nice to meet you, sir. You got someone to be proud of there. Did you know your grandpa was a veteran? Served our country? Well, you know, I put him on the spot. I asked him a question in front of a group, and I get tongue-tied. That's something to be proud of, isn't it? I think so.
Do they know if that is...
We've talked about all this equipment. He's had a lot of good questions.
Yeah, he did.
Don't touch, don't touch. Look at what it is. See that shirt?
Yeah. Come on, come over here.
I'll hold it. You can have a look at it. Yeah, it's a really sharp. I mean, the tip is sharp. The edges aren't, but the tip is. So the tip is what you fight with, or you can hit someone with this. That's the design for it. Sure was.
And I knew that this was bomb.
Yep, you knew that was a grenade, didn't you?
Possibly redo that or something in the dedication.
Okay, let's go.
And even got to look through the periscope.
Okay.
Coleman, don't touch everything. Don't touch. Now.
Yeah, one of the guys was when we did
Coleman.
You know what? I did let you, but you know who's always right?
Come on.
Parents are always right.
Sorry.
the speech that was given.
You're welcome.
You know, they got invited. And,
I've been thinking about it
That's
for
actually
years.
where I work. Museum. I'm the curator for the Chemical Corps Museum. So,
Hi.
well, thank you.
Oh, okay. Probably not dressed like that.
We tried. We've got a great story to tell all three museums there.
Oh,
We like telling two stories.
yeah.
I've been there doing that for not quite 5 years now. I'd like to think whenever I leave it, I'll leave it in better shape than it was when I got there. We'll see.
Yeah. How long did they have that?
The engineers had that museum since 1989. The military police and the chemical corps moved from Fort McClellan to Fort Leonard Wood in 1999. So we've been there about 8-9 years.
That's something.
Yeah, I think you should.
Well, I'm taking it.
A lot of people find that.
I'm not going to get out of there, dog. I don't want you in the picture.
Don't want you in the picture?
What you got there?
This is some of the equipment the French.
Yeah, French. That's a. I'm trying to think of the gun.
Berthier.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been in it.
It is.
Ha.
You know, we're there
Yeah,
primarily.
the LaBelle rifle is a tubular magazine.
Yeah.
And this is
It's just as important to be the public to
Let me show you the man's face.
Kind of Mauser type, yeah.
Originally, that was 3 Army museums in one building.
Yeah.
And 3 rounds, just nothing. So what they did is they enlarged the
Magazine down.
when they fire 5 rounds.
Get in here.
I need to talk to him.
Oh, yes.
I got his card because I'm going to email him.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, you have your wallet, and I will put his card in your wallet, and then
Gotcha.
we've got a shot at getting home with it.
Okay. Yeah, where are you from?
I'm from Lexington.
Lexington. Okay.
It is. It's a reproduction.
Pleasure and an honor to meet you, sir.
Right around the sidewalk.
My
How
granddaughter.
soggy is the ground?
It's not that bad on that.
Okay.
I'd like to get a picture.
Okay.
Stand by me. Good. Smile. Gotcha. Good job. You betcha.
Yes, Papa.
We're not, are we, Reagan? I'm very good. What paper are you with, sir? We're online, so we'll find it. Oh, no, been short all my life. Oh no! Why not? He's going to go look at the house.
flag pulled out around that way? Okay.
That's a good picture.
So this doesn't look like your town when you were a little boy. Just type in the town. Was it flat?
Some good ones.
Well, thank you again for sticking around for the second half of our extra special program here on Memorial Day. Again, for those of you who were not here earlier, of course, this is General John J. Pershing Boyhood Home State Historic Site, and we thank you all for coming. And after we have finished the rest of this program, you're more than welcome to look around the site, and we're going to be taking Mr. Buckles on a private tour of the home, but the rest of you can look through the museum and all. As I said, we're kind of piecing this together from our original program. I'm going to mention a few things, and then I'd like to hand it off to Richard Corey, who is representing DNR for us here today, Department of Natural Resources. He is going to get a congressional resolution from Sam Graves' office, and then we also have the Mayor of Laclede, who's going to be presenting something to Mr. Buckles, and then we'll just kind of close everything down and give Mr. Buckles a tour. Well, today we're gathered here at General John J. Pershing Boyhood Home State Historic Site, much like we have gathered in years past to honor those that have served this nation, those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives to continue to keep this nation free. It's been stated before, but it can never be said enough. Every freedom that we enjoy was paid for in the blood and lives of the soldiers who wear the uniform. Those that fell first at Lexington and Concord, or Valley Forge and Yorktown, the soldier has always answered this nation's call. Whether they wore blue or gray, an even price was paid. It is the history that we all share as Americans. In the trenches of the First World War or on the beaches in the Second World War, the price was paid. And we as citizens owe more than we could ever repay. The only payment a soldier asks is for respect for his or her service to this nation. That is why we're here today. We're here to pause and reflect on our debt to the dead and to the living. Today we will place a special emphasis on the living. Mr. Frank Buckles is the living memorial to a generation that aspired to fight the good fight, a generation that believed the Great War would be the war to end all wars. And once that peace was won, it would unite the world in a lasting brotherhood of nations and end oppression. Sadly, it was not to be. And historians have said this was a childish and naive notion. Honestly, I believe it to have been a true and noble cause. Wars of the 20th and 21st century have sadly fallen short of this measure. I've jokingly stated in these past few days, since we received word that Mr. Buckles wanted to visit the Pershing home, that to even make it the top 10 list of things that a 107-year-old gentleman would want to do is quite an honor. As I understand it, Mr. Buckles has been given a great honor that his final resting place will be in Arlington Cemetery. In reading of this, I was reminded of General Pershing when asked why he didn't want a large statue or monument in Arlington Cemetery as a testament to his greatness. He replied, "The greatest honor this nation could bestow upon me is to receive the common marker given to every soldier of the Great War." His greatest hope was that he could lay with his boys until the last trumpet sounds, and he could lead them into the final victory. The simple headstone marking his grave and all those that served with him is a true testament to his theirs, and your greatness, Mr. Buckles. And again, I would wish to thank Mr. Buckles and all of you who have traveled from near and far to honor the fallen and the living who have answered this nation's call. Thank you, and God bless. Now, Mr. Richard Forrest.
Thank you, Denzel. On behalf of the state of Missouri and the Division of State Parks, we are truly honored to have you here today. I recall over the years that on Memorial Day presentations, we've had young, vigorous individuals from the Pershing Rifles at the University of Nebraska, but you certainly truly honor us, both in terms of your longevity and your commitment to the goals and objectives of the First World War. I'd like to read to you and present you with the resolution that was passed in the U.S. Congress Wednesday, May 21st, 2008, and it was introduced by Representative Sam Graves of Missouri. Madam Speaker, I proudly pause to recognize Frank Buckles, the last remaining American veteran of World War I. Mr. Buckles was born on a farm near Bethany, Missouri in 1901. Mr. Buckles lied about his age to enlist after turning 16, and he fought in France and in Germany. Later, in World War II, he became a prisoner of war for 39 months when the Japanese invaded the Philippine Islands. Mr. Buckles' life represents the last of a generation that fought for our country to protect the freedoms that this country was founded upon. It is his service and the service of those he fought with that we will always remember and pay tribute to. Mr. Buckles is planning to honor his commanding general, John J. Pershing, by visiting his boyhood home on Memorial Day, May 26, 2008. Madam Speaker, I proudly ask you to join me in recognizing Frank Buckles, a true patriot who represents all those who have served to protect this nation. It is truly an honor to serve Mr. Buckles in the United States Congress. Sam Graves, Member of Congress, State of Missouri.
Thank you, Dick. Next, we're going to have Chief Brown, who's the mayor of Laclede, Missouri, and he too has a presentation and a few comments to make for Mr. Buckles.
Mr. Buckles, on behalf of the city of Laclede and all its citizens, I would just like to thank you for the great honor it is to come to the rural community of Laclede to honor Memorial Day and all the ones that have fallen, all the ones that do live to continue on with this great nation we have. As a small token of that, I do have a city of Laclede key for you, one that not very many individuals have ever even thought of having. This is a great honor for you to be here for us, and I hope that you treasure this just as much as we do.
Okay, well, again, we thank you very much for sticking around. I believe we do have some more refreshments left. And sure, go ahead and take your time and look around the site. If you have any questions, be sure to ask the staff. Jenna Kiney, which is in the back here, Catherine Libby, and Kristen is in the back as well. And if you have any questions of Department of Natural Resources, if you spot somebody in a green shirt, you can ask them. Okay. Well, thank you again so very much for coming to see us today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
How about that? We got the key. We can do anything now. You can be honoring the lead.
Am I getting in your way, John?
A great desire to live and do plenty of exercise, and just as you're doing now, you're keeping yourself in good shape. Keep it up.
All right, thank you. It's a great honor.
Sir?
If you could give a young person some advice for their life, what would you tell them?
For longevity? Or
No,
what?
just for living a good life.
Be independent.
Be independent?
Yeah. And listen to all the advice you receive, but make your own judgment.
Okay, sounds like some pretty good words.
And be a Missourian is a good thing.
And do what?
Being a Missourian is a good thing.
Being a Missourian is a good thing. Okay.
Okay. We'll let a few more people shake hands and then.
Mr. Buckle, my name is Mike Brown. I just want to welcome you to Missouri. Okay, it's so good to have you here, and we're just tickled to death that you are here. Okay,
that's the state where I was born.
I understand that. You look like one of those show me people.
Yeah, no question about it.
Thank you so much for coming to see us today, and I hope you have continued good health.
So we'll just make sure we get a pass clear.
Okay, God bless you, sir.
You ready to go inside?
Good.
You ready to see this?
Yeah.
Excellent.
We ready?
Yeah.
Which way are we going?
We're going to go right through here.
Okay, hang on tight.
Start right in the main parlor.
No, although there's a picture of him when he's about 12 years old, and he's in his bed, wallpaper on it behind his hat. We used to always talk about how when you're lying in bed at night, look at the wallpaper and you start to see other things, like other patterns. welcome you today to the Pershing Boyhood Homestead Historic Site. My name is Jana Kiley. I'm the Interpretive Resource Specialist here at the site. I'll kind of start up a little history about General Pershing, and we'll kind of go through the house as we go. This house was built in 1858 by one of the first doctors of the Cleve, Dr. Nathaniel Harris. The property was originally known as Harris Square. In 1859, John F. and Ann Pershing moved from Warrenton following the construction of the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad. When they first moved to this area, they lived in a small one-room section house about 1.5 miles between here and Meadville, in between. And that's where it was said that he was born on September 13th of 1860. He was the first of 9 children. They moved into this house in 1866, and they paid $4,000 for it. In 1866, that was a great chunk of money to put out for a home. The Pershings gained most of their fortune through land speculating. Even though they worked for the railroad, they did land speculate. They purchased the general store here in town. They also purchased the lumber yard. And Mr. Pershing decided to quit his job with the railroad and make a go of running the general store. As the economy grew, they did fairly well for a while. As the economy grew worse and worse, there was a recession in 1873, called the Panic of 1873. They began losing holdings in that year. By 1875, they'd lost everything except for this house and one farm. At that time, the farm kind of became a main means of support. Mr. Pershing, the general's father, went to work as an over-the-road clothing salesman for a firm out of St. Joseph, Missouri. And his mother opened this house up as a hotel to boarders, but it soon closed because there just wasn't enough money in the area. As the economy grew worse and worse, the family ended up moving from here onto Lincoln, Nebraska. They sold out and had an auction. 1885, moved from here onto Lincoln, Nebraska, and then on to Chicago. His mother passed away and died in Chicago in 1906. His father returned to the home of a daughter in Lincoln, Nebraska, and passed away in 1909. They are both buried in the Chicago area. In the meantime, General Pershing wanted to go off and conquer the world as a lawyer, but knew that his parents could not afford to send him to law school. He did see an ad in the newspaper while he was teaching at the Prairie Mountain School that invited him to take an examination to get into West Point. So he did go and take that test at the courthouse at Trenton, which is a couple counties over, Grundy County, and ended up getting in by 1 point over his closest competitor. He entered West Point in 1882, graduated in 1886. From then on, you know that today the home is owned and operated by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, Division of State Parks. We do get our funding from a 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% park and soil sales tax. So that's kind of how we pay for everything that we're able to do at the home. The room we're in is the formal parlor. This room would have been used for weddings, funerals, maybe visiting dignitaries. Children wouldn't have been allowed to play in here because this is where the family would have kept their most prized possessions. To the right of this window is portraits of General Pershing's mother and father. To the left of the window is a picture of President Garfield and his family. It was kind of customary to have a picture of the president of the time in your formal parlor. Maybe so we can see his parents. Yes, sir. Oh, you have? What's your favorite?
I believe the favorite would be the 2 brothers from the University of Texas.
Vandiver? The Vandiver books?
Yes.
Yes. Those are good books.
I have.
Did you read his book?
I have personally read Federal Pershing.
Yes, I had heard that.
I think everybody knows that, Papa.
Well, I don't know about that.
She does. She watches television. You're on television.
Yeah, but I don't watch it.
Yeah, you don't watch it, so you might not know.
That may be the secret to being 107, right there. The key, not watching television. The one that Pershing won the Pulitzer Prize.
That's right.
A few things of interest in here. There's a ledger book over on the desk, written in by General Pershing's father, which we usually just kind of leave over there and are careful not to touch very often. You may remember those.
Do you remember hair wreaths, where they would make paintings out of the hair of the deceased? Remember a hair wreath? They would make a hair painting. There's one on the
the fainting couch for the women who wanted the super slim waistlines. They would faint from lack of oxygen from wearing those corsets. So they developed a couch for them to lay down on and regain their composure. To my school kids, I compare that as to laying down to put on a pair of tight jeans.
Yes. That's right, run the soap up and down.
Right. We do have a few central pieces. The women would wear these hat pins to hold their hats onto their hair. I had a gentleman on a tour one time tell me that there were a lot of good men who perished at the hand of a woman's hat pin. And my response was they probably weren't being very good at the time. Grows just like a stalk of corn, but there's no ears. The price is the broom straws that come off the top. And they were cut off.
Most every village in the other days produced
their own brooms.
Is this pie safe? Is that what your mothers look like? This pie safe, is that what your mothers look like? Always talks about a pie safe.
pie case was usually in our house, was usually a separate room in town.
Then the kitchen?
Yes, separate from the kitchen.
So the papa wouldn't get out.
Probably. Over here is the dry, not original to the Pershing family, but it is original from the period. And apparently they did blow out the front. I can see the front of the stove got so hot that it.
But isn't that interesting that it's, you know, I always pictured it being one of those big things that you see, Tasha Tudor family and that kind of thing. Now, does that stove look familiar? No. Did your mother have a cook stove?
The ones that I remember were larger than that.
The irises outline where the original stable was out back as you're walking through. When the house was restored over the winter of 2000-2001, what we wanted to do was undo a lot of the things because the state of Missouri took ownership of the property in 1952. Of course, the Pershing family left in 1885. So we wanted to make things unmodernized, take them back to the way they would have been. This is a way that we can show the kids on our school tours how the walls were before sheetrock. Also, this house is kind of uniquely built. In all of the exterior walls, it is brick and mortar all the way up through the second floor. So there's your lath and plaster, brick and mortar, and then on the outside of that, siding as well. We had a historical find, not this screen, but if you look up here, there's 3 or 4 layers of the original wallpaper that they believe was on the walls when the Pershings lived here.
So I don't think that here, the reds and that kind of thing, which is underneath this.
Right.
Oh, it's like a stripe.
But underneath the stripe.
No, but I mean not this stripe, but that, the red, is stripey. And you can tell from up there.
And there's another color under the stripe. There's 2 more. See, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 layers there.
And what era is this? 50s?
Probably.
Okay. And then look at that one.
The Pershings, during their good times, in the restoration, we found that this was a swinging door. We believe that maybe they had a hired cook and a hired hand. Up on top there, I have to get approval. Can Mr. Buckles hold the shotgun? That was sure.
Right. Is it heavy?
It's heavy.
Yeah, I got it.
Got it?
Laid across the bar.
There you go.
Now, is that the gun General Pershing shot with?
That's it. Denzel, am I correct in saying that this one was purchased at the Pershing sale?
Where do you look? On the end?
What do you
On the bottom? Hold that. Underneath here?
What are we looking for?
Just looking for the caliber. You just check for
Maybe.
Now, Papa, when you said you used to climb up over the doors sill and get the gun and shoot it off for the 4th of July, was it like this?
No.
No, okay.
This one's heavier.
a 12 gauge? Is that what he said?
When he was a boy.
When you were a boy.
The one that was over the doorway, and when it was 4th of July in New Year's, he would run downstairs to the kitchen, climb up on a chair, and get the gun out, and run outside and shoot it up in the air. I'm holding it.
Let's not get a picture of this.
That might scare him.
General Pershing was quite an ornery kid. Did you know that?
Oh, sure. Okay, sir.
He, there was a story, and I don't know, you'll probably see it when you go to the school, that when he was a young boy, he went out and he found an old rusty Civil War revolver. And he took it inside, washed it up, oiled the mechanism, and shot a hole through his sister's bedpost while she was in the bed.
No! Look at Papa's laughing. I don't know. Papa, would you like a sip of water?
No.
No, thank you. Thank you, anyway. Beautiful, Papa.
Okay. Been told throughout history, to us and city folklore, that any time that General Pershing came back on a return visit, the people would vacate the home. And he had many dinners here in the dining room of the home, even after he no longer lived here. It's been told to us that General Pershing, even after he left Laclede and moved away, he always did call Laclede his hometown. And he came back here several times for several visits. The last one being in 1936, he laid the cornerstone for the high school here in town. And it's been told that whenever he came back to town, the people had so much honor and admiration for him that they would vacate their home, the people who were living here, and allow him to come in and have a dinner and things here.
He was quite a remarkable person.
Yes, yes he was. Just some simple things that are normal. I have read several, yes. I am we all work here and we kind of have our professional things that we do best. And mine is his childhood and the house. The house is kind of my expertise. And my boss, Denzel, he is fascinated with General Pershing and military history. And so that's his forte.
Now, this is he was born here, was it?
No, he wasn't born here. He lived here from age 6 to 21.
But he lived nearby. He was born nearby.
There's some questions as to where he actually was born.
Now, the stream of water ran past the
Locust Creek.
What?
Locust Creek.
How far is that to there?
From here, it is probably 3 miles. I'm going to say 3 miles, probably from here.
The standard very best Creek. Big Creek up in Missouri, where I was born.
By Bethany?
Yes.
Big Creek. Now look at this is on the kitchen where it's lighted up.
Okay. Okay.
Or either the kitchen or the pantry. There's the kitchen.
So she can finish the doors. But I'm sure Savannah would probably enjoy seeing the upstairs too. So I know Mr. Buckles wanted to visit Will for a little bit. So once you're done with down here, okay, when I take Susanna upstairs, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And I will.
And with this large, you might be able to read that anyway. Yeah, I tell you, I'm gonna turn top around. How about that? Then the light will be, I mean, on the shoulder. How about I'm gonna turn you around so that the light comes from your shoulder?
charges in the 50s. And unfortunately, when the Pershings left here, they had an auction and they were low on money and they sold a lot of their things. So a lot of the original Pershing things are gone.
How many pieces do you have?
We have a bedroom set upstairs, 3 original pieces. We have the table there in the entryway. We have a quilt that was pieced by his mother.
Is it upstairs as well?
There's the quilt. You can't see it well. But that was pieced by General Pershing's mother. He is made to be thrown away. Seems like my dryer broke down this morning. This talks about the boys' bedroom. This is an original bed that belonged to the Pershings, as well as this dresser and this washstand. And this talks about what's upstairs in the girls' bedroom and up on the landing. That's a weed sewing machine dated back to 1867. General Pershing, he was the first of 9 children. 3 of them died when they were babies, and they're buried here in the Laclede Cemetery. But he had 3 sisters that survived to adulthood. And then he had 2 brothers. And I would be glad to take Suzanne upstairs. If Will, do you wanted to visit with Mr. Buckles?
Yes. I'm Will Tollerton. I'm the secretary of the Pershing Park Memorial Association. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Buckles last October and interviewing him at his home in West Virginia. And I'm very pleased that, Frank, that you accepted the invitation to come here to Laclede today. It's a great thrill to see you again, sir.
I'm very pleased to be able to come here. And you see, it was interesting to see the birthplace of General Pershing. I've read probably 6 or 8 books on Pershing. And I think I know the gentleman quite well.
Well, last October, after I spoke with you, you requested that I do a little research for you about when you met General Pershing in Oklahoma City, about the hotel that he was met at, and I sent you a copy of a newspaper article from the Oklahoman last November that said General Pershing attended a reception at the Hutchins Hotel in Oklahoma City. So I believe you received that. Well, you're most certainly welcome. It was a pleasure to be able to do that for you and help you in telling your story.
When I met General Pershing, he sent a sergeant after me to come back. He wanted to ask to talk to me. He asked a number of questions. He would have noticed that the jacket I was wearing was a better cut than the one issued by the Army. He would have noticed that I was all very military. And he would particularly have noticed that I was wearing my gloves in my hand. And he immediately would think, what does that corporal mean by carrying his gloves? That's reserved for General Pershing. And when you see pictures of General Pershing, you'll always see what his gloves in his hand. It might be the right hand, or it might be the left. It signified to him that you carry your gloves, you're a cavalry.
I see. So that was a mark of distinction to be a cavalryman at that time.
Yeah.
Do you remember what General Pershing said to you in Oklahoma City?
Oh, yes. Most of the question. He would have noticed that four gold stripes meant that I'd been 2 years in Europe, and he'd ask questions about the different places I had been located. I didn't realize then that some of the places that I thought was not particularly important, he had actually been there.
Mm-hmm.
Very different from many of the military men.
Mm-hmm.
So he was always military. He was in his life. Which books of his did you appreciate?
Well, I read the book called Blackjack Pershing.
Two volumes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's a very good one.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
There's another book called The Last Trumpet Sounds that tells a great deal about his life that we have here.
Which one is that?
It's called Till the Last Trumpet Sounds.
Till the last trumpet sounds. If I don't understand, I'd have to make a note of that.
Well, we have them here at the site office, so we can probably give you one when you leave. It's a newer book, so you may not have heard of it before. Speaking of books, Mr. Buckles, when I met you last October, you recommended to me that I read this book on the Los Baños raid.
Oh, yes.
And I and my father, we read it and really enjoyed it and fascinated by what happened and your experiences there in the Japanese camp.
And the man who was in immediate charge of the raid was Harry Burgess.
Mm-hmm.
He was the oldest man among the paratroopers. He was 26 years old as a major. And he and his wife came to get you and spent several days with us. Also, we went with the airborne back to the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
With he and his wife and my wife and me and 25 other members of the airborne. So I went back to the Philippines twice. I've been back to Los Baños.
Back to the where it originally happened. It's amazing that all the prisoners were rescued without any of them being killed by the Japanese, at least during the actual raid.
Yes, that's why I'm told that all the military colleges, they recommend this book to read about the rescue.
Mm-hmm.
However, it was just lucky. If they'd been a day later, than 2 hours late.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Japanese had, when asked what could they do about the prisoners, the answer was, we would execute them. So on the 23rd of February, instead of being rescued, we would execute. You have a library here?
Yes. Yes. And this was actually a book which, an old library book which we bought, but I was wondering if you could please sign your name here at the bottom. Amongst the survivors, your name is right there. But if you would please...
Well, you'll want to put it on the table.
On the table, okay, yes. You're right.
And he'll sign kind of that table.
that's okay. Anything?
Papa, hold the pen up straight.
Just right at the bottom, please.
Right here. Start over here. Yeah, start right here.
Oh, we're going on a surprise tomorrow, right? Okay. Morgan from the museum says it's a surprise. Morgan says it's a surprise tomorrow, right? Okay, where are we going to next?
They'll probably they'll probably take you over to show you the little the schoolhouse where General Pershing was a school teacher when he was a teenager. It didn't used to actually sit here in Macleod. It was about 8 or 10 miles south of here, but the association, we moved it here. So, and now there's a museum in it that talks about General Pershing's military career, and it's just across the way here. So we'll take you over and show it to you. But thank you very much for signing my book, and for sharing your story with me and the fellow members of the Pershing Association.
I think you have an interesting job. Because you're talking about a very exceptional man. I can't think of any job that handles the situation.
He's a truly unique man. It is amazing that Missouri produced so many remarkable generals, Pershing and Maxwell Taylor and Omar Bradley. And you yourself, a Missouri native.
I believe there were 3 important generals besides Pershing that were born in the 50-mile radius.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's see. Susanna signed some forms. Do you have any other questions for me?
No, I don't think so.
Questions?
Time to move on. The rest of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Buckles. It's been a pleasure to meet you again, sir.
Mr. Buckles, I have a question. You've lived 107 years. What do you think was the best invention during the whole time? What do you think was the most important invention during your lifetime?
We have some of our house in drowning.
Okay.
I'm drowning.
Okay. Well, I know I won't.
Well, of course.
You want to just do it here?
Well, it wasn't the automobile.
No.
Somehow related to Rupert, and he advocated that
I was going to say the typewriter was here already rather primitive form, but
I did see
change in the writing because everybody goes around and convey
Cell phones, yeah. My favorite is contact lenses. My favorite is contact lenses. So I don't wear glasses. I wear the little contacts for my eyes. That's my favorite invention. Contact lenses, yeah. It's just my personal favorite.
I was upstairs. Yeah.
So, do you have a cell phone? Do you have a cell phone? You said you like the cellular. You like cellular phones. Do you have a cellular phone?
And this is where littles can hearing start working. No. No. Different area.
Some of the minor
What do you think about it? Now books are going to be available on computers. Now books will be very widely available by computer instead of actually having the book. You know, you'll be able to see it on the computer. I like to read a book. I'd rather hold the book.
But I have discovered I have an eye problem.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just discovered at the publishing houses that producing books with larger print.
Oh, right.
Susanna's father-in-law just sent me a book. 1776. He wrote before I knew what the book.
Yeah.
But the lines were spaced. There's a line, so you don't read the same line over again.
Right. Yeah, so it's large type and it's easier to read.
With larger print. And more ink on that print.
That is good. Yeah. Because sometimes it is tough to read. They make the print so small.
I noticed that I was reading the book while I was reading Mrs. Times, and I could read about 4 pages with magnifying glass, and I stopped to rest my eye with this wide print, better spacing. I sat down, and that book came. I read about 100 pages without hesitation.
That's great. That's really good.
All right, Mr. Buckles, we're going to take you to the schoolhouse now.
Okay.
Okay?
Question.
Yeah.
When you were a prisoner of the Japanese, Mr. Buckles, did they force you to work like you did the military prisoners?
They didn't force me to work. We worked for ourselves. Japanese didn't. I don't know what it was like in Germany, but the Germans was a public arranged your work schedule. Japanese just wired us in and we would take care of ourselves. But any group of intelligent men were basically on a plan for men to do certain things, cover their purpose. In my case, I was athletic, I always did exercise, and I was in charge of #1 labor crew right from the start. I also have done exercise all my life. I did taught calisthenics, which is where I'd explain that it's your men's advantage to keep themselves in shape, even though they didn't have much to eat. They died by hundreds.
So you taught calisthenics in the camp there?
Oh, yes.
Ah, okay.
And when I went to Los Panos, the same thing there.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, breaks.
special man's coming. Okay, you want to go this way? All right. Okay, Jack. Let's go back over to Daddy. Come here.
Outside Charleston. We live on a farm, on his farm outside Charleston.
Fairmont State.
Oh.
And that's where I got my degree from. I have a farm in Fairview.
Really? And you must have a hard time getting back and forth.
Well, we go back. We haven't done anything with the farm for quite a few years since we moved.
This is incredible. Yeah, they can talk. Go back around and get so you can see that thing.
Now this is a painting of poetry.
It's a painting.
Yes.
It's an oil painting.
Well, it's kind of hard to make out the name. It's either Rider or Riding. Of course, this building was much different when General Pershing taught in here. This would just be one big open room, and what we've done is when the building was going to be destroyed, it was moved up here and converted into a museum, and they came in about 3 or 4 inches from the outside walls, and that way, if we ever decide to turn it back into a one-room schoolhouse, all the original chalkboards and everything are still there with the kids writing on them. Now, the way the room is set up is in his time in Cuba and the Philippines and so on, just right around the room. And I'll kind of point some things out to you. Now, when General Pershing was a teacher here, he was an awful teacher. He terrorized the students to learn on their own while he was studying for his teaching certificate. Well, his sister suggested that he take up another occupation, and she saw in the newspaper that they were giving a test for West Point. So he went and he took the test, and he ended up tying with another young man, and the tie-breaking question is right here.
Here's your question, Papa. Reading glasses.
Pershing and the other young man taking a qualifying test for entry to West Point. So here was the question that made the difference. This was a language test. It says the oral portion of the test, according to local legend, was conducted spell-bound fashion, with only Pershing and one other student named Chapman standing after several rounds of questioning. The Board of Examiners then asked both of them to parse, meaning separate and explain, the following sentence. I love to run. To run. I love to run. The two answers given were A, I as the subject, love as the verb, and to run as an adverb phrase qualifying the verb. The other choice was B, I as the subject, love as the verb, and to run as object of the verb. It says, which of the two answers is your favorite? Verify your answer below by looking beneath the corresponding door. Is door A and B?
You are correct.
Pershing's answer, endorsed by exam officials, put him on the road to West Point. The answer was I as the subject, love as the verb, and to run as object of the verb. His other advantage was his soldier-like bearing, straight back, and filled-out frame. That's why they let him into West Point. That's what this said. Was not the answer. Okay.
Not the right. Okay.
Okay.
Well, now, as General Pershing went to West Point, he excelled at all things military. Unfortunately, he didn't do so well academically, so he was only given a choice when he graduated to command black infantry troops or black cavalry troops. And he chose the black cavalry, and he served in the West with the Buffalo Soldiers of the 9th and 10th Cavalry. And then later on in his military career, he's asked to come back and be an instructor at West Point again. Well, he wasn't any better of a teacher the second time around as he was the first time around. He was a very harsh disciplinarian, and he was constantly dropping them for push-ups. So the commandant asked him to come up with another harassing exercise to torment the cadets with, so he developed an early form of jumping jacks. And that's why they're called jumping jacks, after Jack Pershing.
Did you know that, Papa?
I read it in the...
Yeah. And also, the cadets looked up where he graduated to see who is this guy to be telling us what to do. And that's when they found Mindanao. So you're probably familiar with where Mindanao was. That was a Muslim tribal nation, and they had been rebelling against Spanish occupation for many years, and when the United States gained the Philippine Islands, they didn't much care for Americans. In fact, they said nothing fertilized a good crop like a dead American in the fields. Well, Pershing is sent there to quell the insurrection. He was very successful, And General Pershing gets mentioned, Lieutenant Pershing gets mentioned by Teddy Roosevelt in a speech. And that's when he ends up meeting his first wife, Frances Warren, the daughter of Senator Francis Warren. They end up marrying. He was very poor, she was very rich, and she said, well, a perfectly good ring could be bought for $1, and if you don't have the dollar, I'll loan it to you. That's how they got married. His first assignment was in Japan as an attaché there, and he was later an observer in the Russo-Japanese War.
1905.
That's correct. 1905, he went under the command of General Enoch Crowder. They went over to observe the Japanese and how effective they were at fighting a much larger army like the Russians had. When he comes back to the States, he gets a new assignment. Only his son Warren survived. And it's said that when he received word that his wife and children had died, his hair turned white overnight. Now, this is some photos from on the border. As you know, the punitive expedition, this was the first time the U.S. had used trucks and planes and automobiles. And one of the very first automobile raids was conducted by this guy right here. That's George S. Patton, a young Patton. He raided a small village with 2 Buick sedans. Then over here is just some other photos of the war in Europe.
I'll send you up there if you want to put your legs up and walk it over.
Okay. And this is, of course, the trenches. And then here's the formations as they're doing their calisthenics in Europe.
Oh, so it's prior to departure?
Yeah, a lot of calisthenics, as you know, General Pershing was a firm believer in being fit and athletic.
General Pershing said, muscles should be only as strong as a job puts you in fit. I would say the word intended.
I didn't quite catch that.
Said muscles need only be as strong as the job for which they are intended.
Ah, okay, okay. Well, here we have some artifacts.
Here, Bobby, come forward and look at these. I'm trying to. This machine doesn't go very fast. There we go.
Many of these things look familiar, I'm sure. Yeah. And then, of course, the old Shinola can. And then this over here, of course, is a full uniform.
Oh, here are those mess kits. I love those ones at the museum where they had done the decorations and described it.
And then, of course, these were the tanks that we were using, the French Renault tanks. And the very first officer assigned to the tank corps, as you probably know, was George S. Patton. He was a major at that time. And then, of course, one of Pershing's chauffeurs, although he never drove Pershing, was a very famous race car driver. Decided he wanted to take up Eddie Rickenbacker. You're correct.
I'm quite well acquainted with Eddie Rickenbacker. He was a gymnasium where I lived in New York in 1921 and 22. Eddie Rickenbacker had just was selling his car.
Oh, yeah?
Of the Rickenbacker. And at the corner of 57th Street and 8th Avenue. And when I would pass there in the morning on the way to work at the Banker's Trust, I'd wave at him, and if he had somebody in the office, and I'd come right back in the evening, I'd stop and talk to him.
Really?
And, for that year or two, I probably saw pictures of times ago.
Well, that's really neat. Did you ever get a chance to see Frank Luke or any of the other pilots?
No. But I did see Lincoln Beach in about 1907. Lincoln Beach.
Even for the whole state, I think it's probably one of the best pieces for our collection. And then, of course, there's General Pershing's West Point ring. We're very fortunate to have that. Usually what happens is when a West Pointer passes away, the ring goes back to West Point and gets melted down and goes into the next year's graduating class. Although I don't think that would have happened to this ring. An interesting story about the ring is when General Patton got ready to go to North Africa in World War II, he went to visit General Pershing, and he went into his private suite at Walter Reed Hospital, and he walked up, and Pershing was sitting in a chair, and Patton knelt in front of him and kissed his West Point ring and stood and saluted, and Patton wrote in his diary that when General Pershing saluted back, it was as if 25 years had slipped away and he was still the Iron General. That's kind of a neat little story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pershing was always military.
Yes.
And he didn't believe in being just a son, a smiling general. He was military.
Right. Well, even as a civilian, he was a military man.
Oh, yeah.
Always ramrod straight. Now, this is a picture of him with his son, Warren.
Oh, yes. I never went over it.
And you probably, General Pershing tried to integrate the Army 3 times, and each time it was shot down, not by the Army, but by President Wilson. Wilson didn't want to integrate the Army. And one of the things that happened was, General Pershing had originally planned on taking all the troops to England to train the troops before they shipped to France. And what happened was the English didn't want American blacks on their soil, and the French said yes, so that's why the whole operation moved over to France. And of course there's Pershing, just ramrod straight, as they would say.
Oh, yeah.
The Rainbow Division. That was Roy's division, wasn't it?
Yeah.
My grandfather, my mother's father, was
They
also in
served under
World War I.
MacArthur. MacArthur was a Rainbow Division. And one of the things that General Pershing did was he helped to start the 5-star general rank, the generals of the Army, and he did that so that no other military leader would have the kind of power that he had when he was in Europe. So he wanted to make sure he kind of reined them in a little bit. And this is General Pershing visiting a local boy in Brookfield who was disabled from the war.
That's, near Brookfield, Missouri. Is that
Yes,
near here?
that's the next town over.
Ah. Oh, here, look. There he is at the Lockweed train station.
Yeah. When he would arrive by train, he would walk from the train depot up to his boyhood home, and just hundreds and hundreds of people would just swarm all around him. You can kind of see in that picture there a little bit, just hundreds of pictures swarming all around him, and he would step up on the porch, and he would talk to the crowd, and he would point out friends he remembered from his childhood, and just talked about his fond memories of growing up in just a small town. And of course, as you know, he started the American Battlefield Monument Commission. Of course, they take care of all the cemeteries, monuments, and museums all around the world. And you know, he did this and set it up under the executive branch so that the president is always responsible for the health and welfare of all American fighting people. And this was a picture done by his second wife, Micheline Resco, in 1917. And then this is a picture of him in his private suite at Walter Reed. Now, he escaped from Walter Reed several times, and a couple of times they thought he was kidnapped by the Nazis when he was really just down the street enjoying a good steak.
What was the name of that hotel? He used to go to a certain hotel, not
I know, I'm sorry. I have to get back to you. I know what it is, but I can't think of it
Is that
right
the
now.
one up on the hill in Washington? I can't think of the name of it. I've been there.
I usually can remember it too, but I can't.
To kind of put it in historical perspective, you know, after he had his stroke in '38, FDR decided every time he would travel, the presidential death train would follow along behind him 3 days after. Well, when FDR died in Warm Springs, Georgia, General Pershing was on vacation in Tucson, Arizona. So the death train had to come from Arizona to Georgia to pick him up to take him back to Washington when he passed away in 1945.
Read that book.
Yeah, so do we. Okay. We sing it to Mr. Buckles today.
Here we go, Bob.
Okay. Okay.
All right, well, thank you so very much.
Well, we're going to go
Wonderful.
around on the other side real
Oh.
quick, and then we can
Just like that.
That is very cool.
Are those real or are they reproductions?
I'm sure they're reproductions.
And then here's all the music that we've heard playing while we've been in here. And then this is an old war bread recipe, minus all the things that were rationed at the time. Because, you know, as we have people coming to visit us, I always tell them, you know, back then you couldn't just up and travel. A lot of times you'd have to have enough tokens to get you where you were going and get you back. Tires, oil, gasoline, and of course that's not even counting the things that were rationed by the Food Administration. Poor Herbert Hoover, that was really the pinnacle of his career, was when he was the head of the Food Administration. Of course, later he was elected president, and a few months after that the stock market crashed, so that really did him in. And again, if you need a fresh one.
He was a pilot that flew in like 1908, and he was about 7 years old. And you know, in those days, you know, they hear the barnstormers and things. They would when they first came out with flying, and it was very popular out here. And he saw him at a performance.
Okay.
And he was about he was about 7 years old.
Okay.
And then later on, somebody, I mean, Papa was talking about that a couple of months ago, and so somebody looked it up on the internet and printed out the info for him.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, now I guess we got that little piece of information.
And that was somewhere around here, and since he was 7 years old, it was here in Missouri.
Okay.
There you go. Beach, Flying Circus, probably.
I don't know how you spell it.
H-I-R-A-M, and then it's just like the beach with E-Y. B-E-A-C-H-E-Y.
Okay. Federal, temporary federal contract.
And I saw that Elizabeth had some things, souvenirs.
All the buttons.
No, they were handed out. I thought you had a gift shop.
We do have anything you want.
Actually, I'm looking for. Do you happen to have a little charm? My husband gave me a charm bracelet, and I thought, well, maybe I have. You know, I'm going to put only significant charms on there, but I thought, yeah, I get a little charm.
I think we do have some charms left. We'll just, as you guys are going by, I'll run in the office and grab them.
And I've got my purse somewhere.
Well, we don't. That's okay. We don't sell them anymore. They were discarded. We just kind of give them away special.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, wow. Thank you. So I love your landscaping, and I love the way you did this this walkway. That's really nice.
It's all about accessibility here. You know, our core constituents are seniors, so we've set up sidewalks and ramps and really gone out as much as we can for accessibility.
Okay.
And we're holding off on the parking lot until we get the new building, and then we're going to pave the parking lot. So
What's your new building?
it'll be, well, if you go underneath the blue tarp over there, there's the blueprints and everything.
Okay.
It's going to be right back here in this vacant lot.
Okay.
These buildings will come down, she's only going to get a 6,000 square feet.
Maybe I'll just head over that way and
That's
get her my
nice though,
stuff.
because you want it in the scope of the scale of your town. That's what makes it so fun.
So very much for coming to see us. I really appreciate it.
I'm not on it.
I probably got your spot.
No, you're fine.
Well, that's just fantastic. It's been a great honor for us, sir. Thank you very much for coming in. I was so excited when I heard you were coming. When Will got a chance to interview you, we talked about it, and I said, you know, this would probably be the most important thing that happened in that young man's life. Because I interviewed a 105-year-old World War I veteran, and it's still, I cherish those moments with him. His name was Ralph Laxon, and he was 105. He was from California, from Whittier, California.
Yeah, and can we just do one just kind of from the side, because I'm just like really backward here. Getting kind of punchy and I don't know if I've got it.
Well, a lot of things are changing. A lot more people are getting interested the closer we get to the 100th anniversary. A lot of things are on the computer now where you can do research and things. A lot of kids are really interested. They send us letters. Just a couple weeks ago, we had over 100 school kids that had come here to learn about, you know.
Right here? Yeah, just come out.
him by himself? Or?
Oh, no, with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Is this good? Yeah, that's great. And maybe if you could kneel down, we could both kind of like same. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you gonna smile? Are you gonna smile? You had a good time?
Okay, I'm gonna do one with this.
Denzel's getting his picture taken.
You can kind of hear in the home in the background.
That's all right.
Sure, you guys had a long day. Okay, I think I'm good.
Come here, you. Get over here with me.
That's what that was. It's the class.
No, I like the
Hitting
story
the
of
flagpoles.
My little camera, which is here. It's not as very expensive as yours. There we go. Okay. Okay. I think I'm good.
All right. One more, Mr.
Let me
Buckles.
get out of the way here.
All right. Say cheese.
I didn't turn it on. Did you turn
No,
it on?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
I've got it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for your help. All right. Back to Kansas City we go.
Thank you again, sir. You've honored us by coming.
Thank you, guys.